Welcome, everyone. Say hi, Jennifer, Sue. Hope you're all getting logged on okay. We're trying a little bit of a new system here. I'll get Jennifer to explain the new system once we get all logged on here. So if there's any glitches or anything like that, bear with us. We're just trying this out this time. So welcome. This is our number, what is this, our fourth huddle, right, ladies?
I think fourth feels like 56. I don't know.
We need to start keeping track because we're getting up in the numbers here. So that's pretty cool. Our goal for these is, there's a lot of great podcasts out there and there's so many great shows and that kind of thing. But specifically what we're trying to do with this huddle is give our team an opportunity to, we're all over the world and all over the country. And although we get to see each other at our camps and some group training, it's really to take the opportunity for us to connect. We have a schedule of questions, but also just fire questions at us and hopefully have some laughs and share some stories and those kinds of things. So we've got some questions picked out, but we would love for you to text in any questions that you have. And we're going to have the next hour to hang out and talk about a lot of things going on with racing and training and triathlon and perhaps have some good laughs along the way. So so Jennifer, if you can go ahead and explain to us we've used some different systems for this and our new system, just so people know how it works and how to type in.
Yeah, so it looks probably a little different than what you're used to. It's definitely different on our side, but we're trying out something different where we can actually put the questions up so we'll be able to see them. And if you have a question, just down there in that YouTube live chat section, you just put that chat on there and ask your question or bring up a topic you want us to discuss, and we'll be able to see it, and then we'll talk about it as we go on.
Awesome. So as you all know, we have our upcoming events. We always keep you posted on those through our group Facebook and emails. We've got camp. I know that camps are sort of still a little bit of ways away in people's minds, but believe it or not, we have, I think Camp Sue, it's over half full already. So if you're thinking about the February camp and you want to be a part of the early season fitness and fun, make sure I sent out an email about that. Get yourself signed up and join us for that. We also have our January camp with Tom Morris. So, if you're wanting something right in the new year to start out your season, a real high education camp right there in Indiana, join us for that one in January. That's a good one as well. And you can find those on my site, the mcc.coach in the camp section, read all about them and get yourself signed up there. So, while you're on the site, we also have a few partners that offer us discounts. So most of you are familiar with the Right Stuff. I'm always encouraging you to use that for your sodium replacement and colting wetsuits. You're looking for good bike fits from Psychologic. So if you reach out to any of these partners that you see on the site, let them know you're part of the team. They're going to offer you a discount and we'll take advantage of that. Moxie Multisport, if you're in town, want to go shopping, get some new gear, mention to Blake that you're part of the team and he'll set you up right there. So let's go ahead and get rolling with the questions and the party here, Sue.
Well, when we do the live huddle at camp this year, after our long training day and a few adult beverages, I think the party will be rolling at that huddle. So I look forward to doing that. So
absolutely.
Our first question is, how do you balance group and solo training? Marilyn?
Yeah, so, this is a great topic, especially right now, group training. You've got all kinds of really interesting options out there for us, whether it's a virtual way of doing group training where you're getting locked into communities on Zwift or Strava, all these kinds of things, or if you're in a community where you actually can go and join a run group or a master swim program or a local group ride. Maybe you've got a few friends that you like to connect with. We know that these group environments, they really provide great motivation. If you want to go and there's a social aspect and there's motivation to just turn up, right? I mean, turn up and you're going to have people around you pushing you. Now, what I found to be really, really important, and I want, we'll all chime in here, is that everyone that you meet is on the same page as you. So a trick that I've always used is, first research the group that you're going to be a part of. Make sure it's a quality group and it's the type of people that you want to be training around. Then also let your coach know, or, you know, look at your program and make sure that it fits in with the training, because there's an actual training impact from the group training that you want to incorporate in the total load and the stress of your overall plan. So you want to take that into account rather than just randomly throwing it in the mix. That's pretty important. So there's a different stimuli there. So that has to be taken into account. And then you want to go there with an open mind that everyone's there for different reasons, and you go there with a very clear goal of what your goal is at that group training. Because how many group things have you been to where you had a workout in mind, and maybe you needed to, you know, make sure that's in line with the group dynamic, or all of a sudden you're going way harder than what you thought you were going to be that day, and everything's changed, and it dominoes on you through the rest of the week. So that would be, you know, my number one takeaway for group training is making sure that the group training actually fits in your overall training program, and the stress of the group training is taken into account within your plan. Okay, so the mistake that people make with group training is that they just randomly start inserting it, and all of a sudden we have, you know, we talk about that total load and training stress score and all of that. All of a sudden now we have way too much intensity, or we have, you know, something in the program that leads to injury, illness, or, you know, possibly peaking too early, or those kinds of things, because we didn't actually incorporate what was going to happen in that group training in the overall plan. So when you do that, it's really important to communicate that and have it actually set in there, and make sure that you understand what that group dynamic is going to look like to make that happen. So you have Gate 9 there in Indiana, you know, and that's really evolved into something special. So you really, you know, you lead the group, you have a great group of people show up, you provide the workout, you provide a couple different options. Just go ahead and share with us how you've seen that play out for people, and how it's been incorporated into all different people's training plans.
Well, I think to hit the issues you discussed and avoid the problems, the best thing that people can do is start your own group, which is essentially what I did. So we have a group that started, it was just me at one point, and we have a parking lot at IU, Indiana University, that's a little more than a half-mile lit. Jen's been a guest star for Group 9 workout. But what we did is we told everyone, show up, you can do the workout. You don't have to do the workout. I'll modify it based on your needs and what you're competing in coming up, or not competing in anything. And a lot of people over time, people really liked, one, the structure. They knew they had a workout that was focused, that would accomplish their goals. The community support. So we have some ground rules, which are really support each other, cheer each other on. It doesn't matter if you're the 75-year-old man literally walking, which we have, or we have a woman that's qualified for the Olympic trials show up for the marathon. So whoever it is, whatever your ability, you're there to support each other. And people get that that's the environment. So you might be sucking wind and going, great job at the same time, which is really fantastic. We also have a lot of people we have people coached, a lot of people coached by Marilyn, and then we have people coached by other coaches. So what I do before each workout is I say, okay, tell me what your coach has assigned you for the day. And if I feel like it's appropriate for a lot of people in the group, I'll present that as one of the choices. So Kelly, who Marilyn works with, is trying to will break 20 minutes in his 5K coming up in 2 weeks, which he didn't break by 3 seconds. And then when he listens to this, I'll remind him of that. But Kelly has a very specific workout. So Kelly I'll say, hey, anybody wants to go short and fast, this is the workout for the day. And people will do that with Kelly, which is really great. And a lot of them are 20 to 30 years younger than Kelly doing it.
The first thing I thought of was like, crap, now I got to go that fast so I can beat Kelly. I can't.
Exactly. Well, and someone
really
just set the new Gate 9 record, which is the half mile under 3 minutes. And the woman that qualified for the Olympic marathon trials now has decided that after she recovers from her most recent race, she's breaking it.
Nice.
So it's really fun and lots of different abilities. And it's helped me quite a bit because I do train with them too at times. And it really pushes me to up my game. And I think it's interesting, and Marilyn, I wanted to ask you this. Last time that we had 70.3 in the US, the World Championship, we organized a camp before that, if you remember it. And how do you think that kind of group training can be helpful when you have this big event that you've worked really hard for to achieve, and you've been invited, whether it's Kona or the 70.3 World Championships? How do you think that helps people?
Do you mean organizing an actual camp on the course before it happens?
No, we did the camp at in Tucson, where we invited a bunch of people to qualify for the Worlds.
Yeah.
How do you think that helps people?
Oh yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. Obviously, like right now down in Tucson, I've been training all week with Chris Leifheimer, Kenneth Peterson, Lindsay Corbin, Heather Jackson. They're all in town getting ready for Hawaii. I've been part of Ferris's camps when he used to come to Tucson to train for Hawaii, and every year. And these very specific training camps that people do before World Championships. It's you can get a group of people who are all striving for the same goal and at the same level, and put them together for a small block of time and really lift their performance and a focused period of time. Now, it has to be the right dynamic, because there's certainly a risk of pushing people over the edge when they're in the most key part of their build. And so you have to make sure that it's well managed by a coach, and that people don't get carried away with basically doing their race in training because they're competitive before they get to the race. But I think it can be really, really helpful to get around people who are going to be, getting ready for the same event and pushing each other and having that structure and that focused time period together, and share ideas and just really see, hey, where am I at going into this major event? I think it's also important, as we talk about group training, I also want to remind people that triathlon is a individual sport. And so although we want to include group training because it's motivating and we learn from one another and we push one another, we also can't forget the skill of concentration on our own is extremely important in these events. And so if we are always sitting on a wheel, if we are always relying on others to find that extra bit from within ourselves, if we are completely reliant on a group to just show up, these kinds of things, we might lose that ability to concentrate for, it's a half Ironman, 5-6 hours, Ironman, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 hours. You need to be able to concentrate for a really long time on your own. And so there needs to be a balance, right? I mean, we want the motivation, we want the learning, we want the push, but we also want to be able to cue into our own body and know what's best for us and be able to practice those skills of concentration on our own. That's really important. Those 5-6 hour rides out there all by yourself with nothing but your own thoughts. I mean, that you're not used to that. And the first time you ever do that is race day, and you're not used to pushing yourself, then you're going to run into some problems there. So Jen, I've invited you down to Tucson for group situations before where you've been like, holy man, these people seem a little, you're maybe intimidated, that kind of thing. And then you get through the week and you're just outstanding. What have been the main things that you have learned when you've joined the groups with me down in Tucson?
Yeah, I was just thinking that all the groups I've joined, and especially whenever I was with Marilyn, is I've always had to break through something. And even at the gate 9 run I did with Sue, I had to break through something that there was probably like a barrier that maybe I didn't even know existed, but it broke through that weekend because I just had to, because otherwise I would be riding by myself, which I have to do a lot up the mountain. But that run I did with Sue really sticks out of my mind. I didn't think I could run. I think it was like under like a 7:20 mile for 22 minutes sort of progression. And I'm like, Sue, I can't do this. She's like, just put your watch down. You're fine. Like, just come on. So then I did it, and I did it faster than what was prescribed. And ever since that run, I could run much faster because I was like, oh, I can run faster. Same with the biking. I'm like, oh, I forced myself to do it, something I probably wouldn't do by myself. And then you realize you can do it. And then all of a sudden it's much easier to continue to do it because you've broken through some kind of level. And the group trainings can definitely do that, especially with a group that like yours or running with Sue or somebody who knows what they're doing, and they're not just a bunch of people with egos trying to kill each other, because that's a different dynamic than what we're looking for a lot.
Yeah.
And just to close it out, I think one of the best group lessons I ever had early in my career was I went out with a group of pros, and I'll never forget, it was an easy ride, and I thought, I'm going to die. Their idea of easy is not my idea of easy. It was like soft pedaling in a little gear. And it was so wonderful, and it stuck with me forever, that this is, if you can leave your ego behind and train correctly, properly, and have a long career, you'll know that easy is really this easy. And it was a great lesson. So, and that brings us to our next thing that we're going to talk a little bit about, that people have some questions about, is fatigue and training. What's too much? What should we feel like? Marilyn?
Yeah, especially this time of year, right? I mean, a lot of people are done their season. They've had their big races and they're having a little bit of off season. We just had the World Championships for short course. We just had 70.3 World Championships. We've had a lot of the major races, but we still have, we have to remember there's still a lot of big races to come. There's all the fall Ironmans as well as Kona, these kinds of things coming up. So pace, we've talked a lot in other, articles, and perhaps we even covered it on one of the huddles about pacing the year. And so this point in the year is when I really notice people start to get tired, because we've been training and racing all year. And so, as well as when we're training for these big events, depending on what your goals are, and most of our group is really high achievers with big goals, which I love. And so there's that line of, we have an understanding of, I'm going to need to work really hard and be quite tired. This is an appropriate amount of fatigue and soreness for the training block in relationship to my race and the time of year and what I'm working towards. And then there's the indicators of, hey, I maybe need to say like, hey, I need a couple days rest, or I need a few light days and refresh a little bit and then be able to bounce back. So the key ones that I notice, if someone is typically, you notice patterns and habits. So if someone is typically quite motivated, they're someone who gets the work done all of the time. They're generally pretty upbeat about the training. And all of that is, we take that within. Of course, there is going to be some fatigue and a little bit of grumpiness when you're really tired and that kind of stuff. We have a great article on grumpy training. But if it gets to a point where there's a very clear change for more than 3 days in a row, then that could be a great indicator, hey, I need to back it off a little bit. Another one is if there's, quite an appetite change. That's an indicator. And so, we have these lists of guidelines of recovery you can check off. How is my sleep? How is my resting morning heart rate in comparison to every morning? How is my mood? How is my motivation? How is my appetite? The best person you can ask how an athlete is doing is their closest friend and training partner or their spouse, because they can see them from the outside and they can say, oh, they're kind of the same as they always are. They seem tired, but pretty good, and they're working real hard. Or they can say, man, this person has been unbearable to be around and just really, not themselves, dragging, a bit moody, all of these things. And so if you're tracking that every day, you start to understand what's okay and what's not. And that's the same as, if we're getting these little niggles, if they just stay as niggles that we can work through, maybe that's appropriate for the time of year and the work that you're doing. Or is it, hey, this might be turning into an injury and we need to back off for a small period of time. So, keeping track of these things. There's great apps out there. I mean, we've all heard of the HRV app. I'm not completely sold personally on the HRV stuff. I've used the app myself a lot, and I've had athletes use it and track with it. I find it a little inconsistent, as well as the Garmin one. So although these are useful tools, I think they need to be logged consistently for like a long period of time and watch. Same thing, you're watching for habits and patterns and changes. So, those O2 monitors. So you're measuring your your oxygen saturation every single morning, your morning resting heart rate. The key thing with these is that you're monitoring for change in what's normal. Okay, so it might be even that if you're following someone's heart rate with physiology for a long time, and then all of a sudden there's a spike, but you're asking the athlete, hey, how you feeling, and they're fine, and then there's a huge spike one day, and it might, if it's a female athlete, it might just be that time in their cycle, so you're always, you're monitoring for change. And any drastic change over logging for a long period of time, those might be your indicators. Hey, I need to back off for a couple of days, reboot, or have a recovery week, and then carry on. How about you, Sue? Have you found any, very specific noted things that you pay attention to for your recovery?
Absolutely. For me, I know that increased muscle pain, more constant. If I get night sweats, that's always a sign that, something's probably amiss. And it is hard with women because we do have our periods and it does affect it. So like if I don't sleep well, that could be related to that, or it could be related to I'm a little bit overreached. And I think it's interesting too, when we talk about fatigue, and you and I've talked about this, there's a difference between men and women. And as a small woman, I'm not as concerned if I get slightly overreached. If I consolidate for a day or two, my system tends to reboot and I'm right back in my training groove. But I've found with men, there's a bigger risk. And they might not, within a day or two, they may not consolidate enough to really recover, and they can dig themselves in a pretty good big hole. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think, it's the real obvious is the different hormones, right? I mean, if for women, you really got to watch things like iron and those kinds of things. If a female starts, for younger females, if they start losing their period and they're starting to have iron issues, those kinds of things, you really have pushed it over the edge and need to step back. With men, it's more, if the testosterone levels start to drop way too low and the cortisol levels are getting, for both athletes, higher and higher. And this is something that you can, how do we monitor this without getting constant blood work? And we don't necessarily, there's physiologists and then there's coaches, and we don't, because we're not an Olympic team, we don't have access to physiologists taking blood samples every single day, or taking our urine sample every morning to monitor these things. But with those guidelines that if we, like I say, track them over time, and you start to see those changes, those could be just indicators in general that, hey, maybe these things are starting to get a little bit out of whack. And for the men, if the testosterone starts to go really, really down and the cortisol come way up, then we definitely, it can take them a little bit longer to bounce back. More muscle mass, usually they're a little bit bigger, these kinds of things. And so you have to be careful with that. I wouldn't say more. I think both are equally as important. It's just that the indicators of what's going on might be a little bit different. And like you say, the bounce back time is perhaps, a little bit quicker or not, depending on how far it's gone. So I don't know. Have you ever experienced any, I know you see a doctor regularly.
I do.
And that's a big thing, is that if you're getting, if you're getting blood work regularly, then you take the guesswork out of it. Right. If hey, I'm getting my iron checked regularly, I'm getting, magnesium checked regularly, B vitamins checked regularly. We know that this is all in line. And then we're monitoring over a long period of time those indicators, those guidelines, and we're keeping that all in check. Then, hopefully we prevent that kind of thing from happening before it gets to those points.
How often do you do your blood work?
I think once every 6 months is enough.
And there's a lot of ways you can do it online now too.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a little bit different than it used to be too.
I had a panel done in the middle of Ironman training, and it was very different than when I was off, and I needed a lot more supplement just because I was breaking things down so much, which was great. So now there's a baseline for either one to use, nothing's off. It's just to stay in the optimum level.
Exactly.
Of health.
True story. I had a blood panel done in the middle of training one time, and I go back to the doctor's office for an appointment, and she sits me down and she goes, "Now I've contacted the oncologist." And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, what is your white blood cell count is very low. Yeah. And I recently adjusted that, so it's much better now. So I had to provide her, and she had a sports medicine background, so she was super open to it. And I said, no, that's normal for an endurance athlete. Let me send you the studies.
Well, and the key thing that you're saying there is it's really important to work with a doctor that understands endurance athletes. CK levels are going to be really high. White blood cell count's going to read funny. What's normal iron ranges and ferritin ranges for an athlete versus a non-athlete. Like these are all the things that you really want to make sure that whoever you're working with is dialed into that, because it's quite different than just your everyday person. So those are the things that you definitely, want to make sure are taken care of. And then there's the question of illness. People at this time of year, it's a common time of year to get sick because, kids are back in school, the seasons are changing, and maybe you're still training for a race and, you're more susceptible to colds because you're lean, especially people going to Hawaii. They're at their all-time highest training load. They get extremely lean to go there. And then it's, when the seasons are changing, people are going back to school, and then we all get on a plane and go onto an island together. And you see people getting sick really and not able to start their races. And so the main thing to know about getting sick and training is if it's in your chest or you have a fever, you need to stop. You cannot train through that. You need to stop. You need to, just take a break. You're not going to lose all of your fitness. Take a couple days, let the fever come down. If it sits in your chest for longer than 5 to 7 days, you need to go see a doctor and get it taken care of. So, I think, there's a little cold. If you've got a little bit of a nose cold, it's okay to train through that and just back off the intensity and that kind of thing. But if you have a fever, or you actually have a genuine chest cold, I really highly recommend you got to just sit down for a few days and let it run its course, and then carry on from there. So,
well, and that leads into the next question for feedback for you, coach. It's very easy as coaches for us to look at training peaks and notice some of the things we talked about with training fatigue, but often we don't know about what's going on in someone's life beyond training. Right. So how does the feedback for your coach kind of fit into that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, with my athletes, I am like, as you guys know, I am so adamant that I don't want to just see a bunch of files downloaded. Files are like a quarter of the picture. So for me as a coach, what I'm always monitoring is, okay, here's the session that I prescribed today. This is what I'm hoping to get out of the person. And this is the energy system we're hoping to train. This is what we're, within the block of training and the total load over the week and the training block towards the race. This is what I want out of them that day. And so I'm looking at the file to see, okay, were they able to hit those numbers? Are we improving? Are we, getting the numbers that we expected for that session on that day in relationship to everything else? Then I want to know in those post-activity comments, how did it feel? Oh, that felt easy. Oh man, that felt really hard. And if I'm thinking, oh, that was supposed to, that should have felt, maybe they hit the numbers, the file looks great. But if it felt really hard, I need to know that. Or if it felt really easy, I need to know that. Or if it was 104 degrees out, I need to know that. If it's, was really, really windy, or if maybe I got 3 hours of sleep last night because my baby was up screaming all night, or my dog is sick, or, I had a fight with my spouse, or, maybe I missed dinner, but I got lunch at like 2:00 and I barely drank any water, or, I've been up since 4 a.m. and I'm doing this session at 10 p.m. These are the kinds of things that really affect. So if I just see a file and, or I said, hey, let's do 7 by 4 minutes at 7-minute pace. And I'm looking for a certain heart rate for that person and seeing if they can hit that pace on the run. And I see that, heart rate was really, really high and they were nowhere near hitting the numbers. And I think, oh man, maybe that, if I only see the file, I need to know why that happened. What was going on? Maybe there was a whole bunch of different factors. Maybe it was, 110 degrees out and it was really, they weren't able to, or maybe there's something that could be the indicator that, hey, maybe we need a rest day, or maybe we need just a couple light aerobic days and then pick the intensity back up. So these notes of, no, I don't need to know, like, you washed
what
your
was about with your spouse, so you don't need to know.
Yeah, I don't need to know what your fight was about. I don't need to know, that you drove to the grocery store, or whatever, all these extra little things, or, how my clothes felt and all that stuff. I just need to know what the key things are that might have impacted the session and what it might have affected the numbers, and that kind of thing. And are we on track, or do we need some rest, or could we push a little harder? Like, hey, this is getting too easy. Maybe we could step it up a notch a little bit. So
extra points.
So Jen, what happened when you did a 2-hour run at 115 degrees? How did your coach respond?
I don't know what you're talking about. Who would do that? That's ridiculous. That's when I first started, I would do those. And then this year I've been on the treadmill and I don't do that.
But because your coach knew that information.
Because after a while, you're like, all right.
And then she adjusted by reprimanding you and telling you to get on the treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. I this year I think she's had to yell at me a lot less for those kind of stupid of those things. And plus, I like to train, and I don't want to have like an easy run the next day because I was a moron the day before and killed myself. So
well, and here's the other thing is those notes are super important to me because you know how we're talking about the recovery guidelines and how much fatigue is okay. Well, if someone is making notes all the time, here's the thing about reading hundreds and hundreds of training logs for 20 years. Is that each person has a way that they write, and they have things that they say all the time. And I can pick out from reading them weekend, I'm looking from the outside in. So I can pick out how they normally are. And I know, okay, this is how this person's personality is, the jokes or, how they communicate through their logs, just like when you're hanging around someone, becomes very, it's very noticeable. And when all of a sudden there's a clear change for a period of time, that's the first indicator to me as a coach to say, hey, something's up. Whether there's something going on at home or there's something going on with their training or something going on with them, then I know like, hey, how are we doing? What's going on there? Do we need to adjust things? Do we need to look at how the training's going? How are you feeling? Those kinds of things. And when you're in person, you can have those conversations, or you might be watching the athlete for these things all the time without them even saying anything, but it's really important in the training logs. I get a sense for someone's personality, how I'm going to be able to push them through some barriers, how they react when I do push them. Maybe if they're, like I say, those fatigue things, something will come up that I'm like, this isn't normal for this person. I need to reach out and say, hey, what's going on? And so, and you get to know people. That's the beauty of working with people for a long period of time. You really get to know them and know what their normal communication is like.
I also think anytime as an athlete, you can provide your coach with a scale, because as athletes or high achievers, we're really good at minimizing what's going on. Mm-hmm. So how's your foot? Good. On a scale of 1 to 10, well, it's a 7 or 8. That's not necessarily good. So I think anytime we can get athletes to give us kind of also a quantitative feedback, super helpful. And I've noticed one of the reasons I really like Gate 9 is I get to eyeball people, and I get to eyeball a bunch of our athletes, which is super helpful. And it brings me to camp because we learn so much about our athletes at camp. What do they look like really fatigued? How do they push through? What does that mean? And I think that we get a really good idea of what their feedback looks like on paper versus reality. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why I encourage everyone to come to camp at least once a year, because I want to get a chance to get to know their personality in person when they're at their all-time tiredest. By midweek at camp, people are pretty tired. And I get a chance to really see how they are in a group environment, in some stressful situations, when they're really tired, maybe they're being really challenged. And I'm always watching that stuff. And I'm able to get a really good feel for, how they are as a person, and knowing, okay, as we go forward with this year, what are some of the things that maybe mentally or that we're going to have to learn how to deal with or cope with and manage to be able to reach the goals that they set out for themselves. So seeing everybody in person once a year is really important to me as a coach. It always has been. And that's why I almost say to everybody, like, I want you to get you to one of them just so I can spend that that time with you. Even if we don't have 20 conversations that week, I'm always watching, and know that, like, okay, this is how this person is when they get tired. This is how they are when they get stressed. This is how, all of these things. And then it just helps me, helps me push them towards the goals that they've set out for themselves even more. So, fortunate with some of the people that are right here in Arizona, I get to see them more often. But I try and see everybody once a year if I can.
Great.
Yeah. A couple questions there.
Recent. Oh, do we have some questions up?
Yeah.
Jen?
Oh, it was just people laughing at us.
You're allowed to laugh at us.
We got LOL.
Yeah, you're allowed to laugh.
Names, Katie.
I want to make sure we answer some of your questions too.
The next question we're going to talk a little bit is about tapering, and I want to start with an example. I had a friend whose wife was training for a half marathon, and she's 4 weeks out of the race, finishes the week, she's starting her 3 weeks out of the race, and her husband goes, "Great, you're tapering now." And she talks to me, she says, "My husband says time for a taper," and I said, "Oh, that's old school." So let's talk a little bit about tapering, how it's perhaps changed a little bit, what your philosophy is, and
I drive her crazy because every single race, she's like, every taper is different. I don't understand.
Get rid of the word tapering. That's what I've decided. That's
Freshen. Freshen
the
up.
problem.
Freshen's the best.
I mean, when you look at it, everybody's a little bit different, and I've definitely experienced, with some athletes, there's a lot of moving parts. So it depends the time of the year. Okay, how much training load do you have over the total year? You have to look at how much each person is training. What is their normal training load, and how long does it take them to freshen before they start to lose more fitness than what is ideal for their race performance? So when you're talking in terms of taper and performance, the idea is that you come into that absolute peak sweet spot right on that day. And there's, physically and mentally and emotionally. So, it's a real fine art. And for everyone, it's going to look a little different. Like it looks different for someone who's training 10 hours a week versus someone who's training 34 hours a week, right? And some people
talk a little bit about what that general thought is on that. I think it's interesting for people to hear that.
Yeah. So obviously, for some athletes who have really high volume programs, they're going to need to start to start the freshening process actually a little bit further out and come fresher and fresher every single week towards the race. And that is what we call the old school method. If, back in the day when those guys were training, 35, 40 hours a week, and Mark Allen was, really big on you start freshening 3 to 4 weeks out. Well, because he was training 50 hours a week full time, and he needed to bring that down on a very gradual basis all the way down to race week so that there was enough fatigue shedded, as well as, all of those hormones that we talked about are back up, and he's ready to go on a race. Now, if you only are able to train regularly 10 hours a week, if you ramp that down on the same percentage, the rate that you're losing fitness is going to be too much. And by the time you get to the race, you're actually going to be out of shape. That also, this is where it's so individualized to each athlete, is some people lose fitness very quickly, right? And freshen quickly. And some athletes need more time to freshen, and they get really fresh, and they need to, be really fresh and bouncy to race well, and they need a lot of rest going into a race. So this is where getting to know an athlete really well. I've really experienced with really high volume, and you see this with a lot of professional athletes who are in that, high volume range, where if you keep the volume high all the way to the race and then bring it down too quickly, so the actual total load is dropped too aggressively, they'll actually feel that feeling of not being able to perform in the race, or even slightly cramping in a race. So if you see these athletes that where they jump on the bike or they get into the race and they're like, my body just wanted to kind of cramp up versus perform. And when I went, even though I felt really fresh all week, when I went to push in the race, my whole body just kind of felt like it was a big cramping ball. It's likely that the drop off was too aggressive, too close to the race. And that's when we start to do the things like the reverse taper for someone like that. You might freshen them 3 weeks out and then actually build their normal volume into the race. Someone who's only able to train 12 hours a week, that's training, let's say, that they can absorb or do within their life. There might not even really be a need for a taper. You can just have a couple easy days. They'll freshen up enough. They'll maintain and hold their fitness and go ahead and race really well in these long events. So I guess my main takeaways are, you need to know yourself as an athlete and know how quickly you freshen and how quickly you lose fitness. You need to know what your total volume over the year is and what your total load is going into a race, and know, what that looks like in terms of getting on that day and feeling fresh and ready to go. The other thing is that for long distance events, we don't need to be as bouncy and fresh as, say, a real short, fast event. If you're racing the shorter and the faster the event, you're going to need to be probably a little fresher to go really, really fast. But with the long events, we want to make sure we carry that fitness a little bit higher into the race. And again, maybe for like a race like Hawaii, where you're going to be digging really deep and the well is going to be pushed really hard, or maybe you're racing professionally, you need to make sure that the freshness is enough that you're able to do that on that day. So again, it's really individualized. What's the person's goal? How hard are they going to be racing? How much is their training load? Where is it in the season? How quickly do you freshen? How quickly do you lose fitness? So these are all the different things that you're watching constantly and making sure that comes all together on that one day. Mm-hmm. So do you have anything to add to that, Sue?
I think sometimes a lot of our new athletes are surprised with how much work we do before a race, especially the long course athletes, I think in general, that you may have a longer workout 10 days before a race.
Absolutely, yeah.
And most people think, I'm going to coast in now, the work's done. And I think getting you're mentally prepared that that's not how this works, that's not how we do it, that you're still going to have some intensive efforts and you're still going to have a little bit of fatigue. It's not going to completely dissipate. And then for some of our athletes that are single sport athletes, things like if you're a pure runner, the taper might look a little bit different because running is structurally hard sometimes. So you might taper 2 weeks out 20% if you're going maybe over 50 miles a week. You might taper 40%, the week before the race, but still have a long run in that weekend before your race. So I think that a big part is just mentally getting prepared that the work isn't over till the race day is over. And if we get people focused on that rather than the word taper or what it should look like or feel like, I think people are more successful.
Yeah, and that's a really good, people start to panic like 4 weeks out if they're not feeling fresh and having their all-time best numbers. And I always reassure people, it's too soon.
Yeah.
It's too soon. You should still be working pretty hard at 4 weeks out. And so that's when, it's good to just kind of remind yourself, like, don't panic. I've still got a long ways to go. And if you're starting to stress about the race 4 weeks out, you might make yourself mentally a little bit too tired by the time you get there. So just kind of relax and settle into the work and know that, you still got some work to do. And, it's just fine if you're not feeling that great yet. And a good friend of mine, she was a 70.3 world champion. She was second in Kona, won a lot of Ironmans, course record, Sam McGlone. She was pretty amazing. She used to say in her tapers race week, like 3 days before the race, if she felt good, she knew she was going to have a shit race. She was like, if I feel good the 2 days before a race, the third day out, she's like, I just know I'm going to race terrible. She knew she was like, she almost needed to feel like a bit like crap. Mm-hmm. And then she knew she was going to have a great race. So those are the kinds of mind games that, you get used to dealing with and coping with.
I think my two favorite tapers have been this year, Ironman Santa Rosa. I went and rode Kid Peak with you 2 weeks before the race. And then before Lake Placid, just now, the 7.3, I rode with you Lemon into the weekend and just got killed. Just like I was just in the well, digging out of the well. and then recover from that, go into taper, and then like it's just like that fitness just boosts right there. Those 2 weeks later, right on race day. I like those.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I always feel like crap during the freshening period, and it
true.
always feels like I'm getting a cold
Yes.
every time. Like it's the way my system recovers. But it's interesting, and it's good to learn.
That's really common. Yeah, most people, almost everyone, they're like, "Oh, I'm getting sick." You know, you're okay.
Yeah. Katie tells me to stop whining and get back to work.
Yeah. He knows this taper when I take out my Himalayan salt and then start gargling with it at night. If you're not on my sore throat, I'm like, I swear to God, this is the race. I'm going to get sick for it. No, it doesn't. It's never happened.
All right. Where does my engine come from? This is always an interesting discussion and how it affects your training and your racing.
Yeah, Sue, why don't you take this one a little bit?
I think this is an interesting topic for people because I think a lot of people don't think about their engine, what it is. And we've talked a little bit about, before preparing for this, I saw a great photo of 2 top runners, I think Stephanie Bruce and maybe Shalane Flanagan. And one of them was a push runner, one of them was a pull runner. And in our sport, I think of Rinny as kind of that push runner. She's got the high knee carriage. She's driving through the whole time. She's a fast runner. And then you have, if you look at Daniela, she more is a pole runner. She's more leaning back. And it's good to know how our body moves the most efficiently. And for some people, there's more power involved. If you see me running, we've talked about this. I've got the Ironman shuffle down to a science. There's no power. It's very efficient. You know, I know in an Ironman, I'm never having to go that fast, and it carries me through to the finish line. So I know for me, my physical strength is just a high aerobic capacity without fatiguing very much. I fatigue less than other people. So that tends to work out really well for me. Marilyn?
Yeah, you know, the biggest, we won't spend forever on this topic, but most recently, someone said to me on a ride, you know, I'm kind of a strong bike rider in terms of I can push a big gear, and which translated why I did well in strength sports, right? I mean, there's not going to be a lot of triathletes who could transition into powerlifting or weightlifting. So I'm built a little bit, you know, I've got big legs, strong legs, that kind of thing, and always can push a big gear, keep the heart rate low, and manage that, and I don't get that tired. And recently I was trying, for whatever reason, I had been like trying to spin up hills more, you know, and matching the cadence of, you see this really often, people who are great runners and come from run backgrounds, they tend to spin and rely on their engine to go fast on a bike. People who are strength people like me, we tend to put it in a big gear and really push and mash over the hills and keep the heart rate lower, but our strength won't run out. And so I had been making the mistake of spinning up hills for summer, and I was blowing up and getting dusted off the back of a bunch of hills, and I couldn't figure out I was like, what is going on here? My heart rate's skyrocketing. I'm getting blown off hills. I never get blown off. And someone came up beside me, and they're like, and it was just a random off comment by a friend. He said, Marilyn, go up a couple gears. Let's use those legs you got. And I was like, oh my God, right. And I put it up a couple gears and I mashed over the hill and my heart rate came down and I was right there. And I know my legs aren't going to get tired, fatigue muscle wise, because that's the type of rider I am. Versus if you take a runner who likes to, you know, they're real efficient on the run. They've got a high turnover. They're often going to go to a lighter gear and lift the cadence on the bike. So those types of little things where you can use what your strengths are to your advantage to perform better. And I think as you get to know yourself better as an athlete, the more you're going to be able to dial into that. And same thing on the swim. Does the engine come from your legs or does it come from your pull? Those are things that you can do tests for. You can do a kick set test and find out, is my engine for my legs? And then you do maybe a pull set test set. Does my engine come from my arms? And then compare it to a swim test set and see where you fall and compare on that. And then with those, you work the other end, of course, to make improvements and know that, okay, well, if I need to do, if my engine comes from strength, I need to make sure I do some of the high RPM stuff. But then when it comes to performance, I rely on my strength and tap into that. So, those kinds of things are good to know about yourself as an athlete, or have your coach help you pick those strengths and weaknesses out.
Yeah, and the same thing, pushing people on the running to experiment with higher cadences.
Right.
And figure out how that works their gait and their heart rate. A lot of people don't think I can't run at 90 cadence, or I can't run at 80 cadence, and pushing people to experiment with that and track it over time, I think, is super helpful. And where the strides at the end of a run are great to help people work on that.
Absolutely.
So, Jen, have you learned anything about your engine the last year and a half?
Besides that I can't kick, which is apparent.
Right, what?
I can't. I'm all pull. It's changed too, especially coming from a strength CrossFit background. I had done endurance younger, not trained it, just that's always how I ran. And then I retrained my engine to be like really quick twitch and try to be as fast and red line as fast as I can and keep it there. And so it's been interesting, like having that is an asset because I can stay at a higher threshold for very long periods of time. But then building that aerobic base definitely has been taking time. And so I definitely am evolving constantly the more I get into the sport and as things go, and then strengths have changed and has developed differently. I going into this, I would assume my strength was my running, and now it's definitely my biking, which has changed dramatically.
Yeah. And all those kick sets during your swimming.
God, I got that same set on Friday. If you ever had kicks from hell from Marilyn, wish me luck on Friday.
For those of us
that have the banded only forever, it's much better. Kicks up from hell is terrible.
Right.
And that brings me into the end is near. You're what, 6 or 8 weeks out, I think, right?
9
9 weeks out.
Not counting. I don't know.
Let's give her some hope, Marilyn. What does an end of season break look like? Let's talk a little bit about that tonight, because some people are probably starting it, or it's coming up, or
yeah. So some people, like I say, we've had some big races and people are in their end of season now, and some people still have a lot to go. Everybody needs an end of season. Okay, so right now, we've talked about this before, where the race calendar is pretty much 12 months of the year now. You can race all year long, every weekend if you want to. And it's really important to have a little break at some point and say, this is the clear end of my season, and take a couple weeks. I think it's important to take 1 week totally just off, just go check out. Now, if you want to do a little activity, some different things, some yoga, some walking, a little bit of jogging, but just no structure, no pressure, no stress, just go. If you want to just sit on the couch and do nothing, okay, cool. That's totally fine. Just go and do a bunch of yard work. I don't know, do all the things that you've been neglecting all year. Reacquaint yourself with some of your friends and your family, all that stuff. It's good to take a full week and check out. And then, take another week where you just really keep it pretty easy. Really, really easy, maybe even still checked out for some people. Depending on how big your season was, if you're someone who has a real high volume program and races a lot, I think the bigger your break needs to be. So maybe that break even looks like 3 weeks to a month. If that's not something that, your season wasn't that big, you don't really train that much week to week, your break can be a little bit smaller, but everybody needs one. So I think it's, clearly outline that. And then once you've had a couple weeks, I recommend somewhere between 2 weeks and a month. More than a month's too long. Once you get over a month, we're starting to get into that danger territory of now we need to be getting back to some homework and analyzing, like, how did this last year go? And what are my goals for next year? And now we need to start to address all of those pieces of the puzzle that you wouldn't address in the race season because you're in racing blocks and you're working towards an event. And the off season is the time to work on all of the homework to improve and get ready for the next year. So make a clear decision. This is the end of my season. Take somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks of, I recommend definitely 1 week off and then anywhere from another week to 3 weeks of very low key, low structured, low stress type training. Maybe even, it's just, if you always do 2 a days, it goes down to 1 a day. Maybe you're doing some jogging and some strength, that kind of stuff. What have you, so you've been at this a long time and you've managed to be relatively injury-free and healthy for a long time. What would you say are the key success things that you've done in your off season to be able to maintain that? And especially now into your, dare I say, into your 50s?
My 50s is right, probably.
Right. So, I mean, as you're aging up and we're aging and you're at this for a long time, so athletic age, personal age, and someone I would consider very successful at staying healthy for year after year, what does that look like for you?
Well, I think that when you schedule your break, if you want to stay happily married and have good friendships and everything else, that it's really important that you strategically pick the break at the end of the season. So I try to pick it around maybe a family trip. So because everybody just loves if you've got a week with them and you don't have any training, you're entirely focused on them. And I think that just puts banks some goodwill for the coming year. So I think, plan and look at your holidays, things like that. For me, 2 weeks, 1 week, no swim, bike, or run. And I really have to have a rule about that. The second week, I generally try to do one of each. But it's mostly mental, refreshing mentally. So I'll do things I don't typically do. I hate yoga. I know I'm alone in that, but I hate it. But I'll go do a yoga class, or I'll play racquetball, or I'll go rowing. Or
wait, you play racquetball?
Oh, hell yes!
Does that look like Katie just swinging the racket?
Go at racquetball. Now Katie is better at everything than I am. That's a whole nother. So trying new sports I find is super helpful. And then because I am in my 50s, I do think we have to be careful with how long that break is, because we detrain pretty fast. And I'm thinking more long picture about how am I going to age into my 70s and 80s. So this is about my health. So I don't see the training as a burden. I see it as a way that I can be the healthiest 52-year-old I can be. And, what?
I was just going to say on that point that every single athlete I've ever asked what their secret is, who's over the age of 60, who is really still, like, in my eyes, just completely kicking ass. Like they're healthy, they're strong, they're happy, they look fantastic, they're active, and every single one of them across the board says the same thing: just don't stop.
Yeah. And you see it now. I see it. I have friends all around me. Inertia creeps in emotionally. I don't want to work that hard anymore. Inertia creeps in physically. Oh, I've got arthritis in my knee. Inertia creeps in their life. People sometimes in their middle ages get depression. They have all kinds of issues. So I'm trying to I think if we're always framed on the big picture, it keeps us going. So, and also the challenges that we do as a team in the winter are great for me, because December, who am I going to beat running with running volume? When we had done the big steel, how much weight can we move? So having some new challenges always helps me kind of focus on some things I need to work on, but yet recover mentally, emotionally, and physically to get ready to kick it next season. And I'm really excited about next year, because I didn't get to triathlon much this year due to some family commitments. But next year, game on, ladies.
She's after it.
I am after it. Katie's already planning our little talk about what I need to do to be at the top of the game again. So
Katie on here. She could be I
was going to come on here, but half the time would be, oh, she's whining about nothing. Oh, she's fine. Get out there. Well, we're going to close now because we're at 59 minutes and it kind of flew by. We hope everyone enjoyed it, and thank you guys for all attending. And Marilyn has a few closing comments for us.
Yeah, we've had an amazing season so far this year. I'm super proud of everyone's efforts and performances, and everyone just keep up the good work. I love how everyone's supporting one another. Continue to do that. Share with us where you're racing next, what your goals are if you're brave enough to put that out there. I encourage you all to keep pushing each other, cheering for each other, create lifelong friendships, and let's finish out the season strong. And hopefully we can all come together at the end of the year and have a little regroup and powwow and a cheers with a drink about the year. So thanks for your time, guys. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Jennifer. Hopefully, we might have not gotten to all of the questions that were typed in, but we'll definitely do this again. So thanks for taking your time to be with us tonight, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Cheers.